The rain poured that night, as if the sky itself mourned something unseen. Street lights blurred into hazy halos, and the city shimmered in reflections of gold and gray. Inside a black Bentley, rolling through the slick roads of Manhattan, Ethan Langford, the 34-year-old billionaire heir to Langford Enterprises, adjusted his tie and muttered under his breath. He had just left another empty business dinner, one where laughter echoed only for profit, and glasses clinked over deals rather than hearts. His father's name, Richard Langford, still carried power, even after his death 10 years ago. And Ethan had spent nearly a decade trying to live up to a shadow so tall that it often blocked his own light. He was thinking of that when the world changed in a single second. The sound, a dull thud, cut through the rhythmic drumming of rain. His tires screeched, the Bentley jerked to a stop. Heart hammering, Ethan leaped out of the car. Through the blur of headlights and rain, he saw her, a woman, lying motionless on the asphalt, her soaked coat clinging to her trembling frame. "Ma'am, oh God, are you all right?" Ethan's voice trembled. Her hand moved weakly, her lips quivered. Then, through cracked whispers that barely rose above the storm, she said something that froze him to his bones. "Richard?" Ethan staggered back, the sound of his father's name coming from this stranger's mouth. In that rain-soaked street, it made his pulse stutter. No, I'm Ethan," he stammered, kneeling beside her. "My father's name was Richard Langford." Her eyes fluttered open. There was pain, yes, but behind it, something else. Recognition, sorrow, memories she hadn't yet spoken. You look just like him," she murmured before her eyes closed again. Ethan's world tilted. He called 911, his voice shaking, and waited as paramedics arrived. The woman was rushed to St. Helena's Hospital, her ID found in a worn leather wallet. Margaret Shaw, 58. No address, no emergency contact, no family listed. Ethan stayed until dawn. He told himself it was guilt, but deep down he knew it was something else, something about her voice, that name, that look. When the doctor finally came out, his tone was steady. "She'll live. A mild concussion, a few bruises, nothing major. She was lucky." Ethan exhaled. "Can I see her?" "She's sleeping now," the doctor said. "But she did say something strange before drifting off. She kept saying I should have told him the truth. Do you know what that means?" Ethan didn't, but those words stuck to him like wet clothes. The next morning, against his assistant's protests, he drove back to the hospital. He found her room quiet, the steady beep of monitors, a vase of white lilies by her bedside. She looked fragile but peaceful. When she stirred and saw him, her eyes softened. "You came?" "Of course," he said gently. "You were hurt. I wanted to make sure you were all right." Margaret smiled faintly. "You even speak like him, always polite, always careful." Ethan sat, confused but intrigued. "You knew my father?" Her eyes glistened. "Knew him, I loved him." The words hung heavy in the air. Ethan's pulse raced. "I what?" She looked down, her frail hands clutching the blanket. "Years ago, before he became the man the world worshipped. We were young, foolish, and full of dreams. He promised me forever, but forever never came." He didn't know what to say. Richard Langford, the man everyone admired, the titan of business, the philanthropist, the family man, had a secret lover? And yet, looking at the woman before him, Ethan saw no deceit, only sorrow aged by decades of silence. "Why didn't you ever reach out?" he asked quietly. Her voice cracked. "I did, many times, but he had a wife, a son, a legacy to protect. I was the chapter he tore out to keep his story perfect. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. Why call me by his name? She smiled sadly. Because for a moment I thought he'd come back to me. You look so much like him the day he left. Silence filled the room, thick, fragile, human. Ethan leaned back, his mind spinning. He thought of the framed portrait of his father in his office, the one that had watched over every decision he made. Suddenly that man's eyes seemed to hide something deeper. "Margaret," he said softly, "what did you mean when you told the doctor you should have told him the truth?" Her lips trembled. "Because there's something you need to know, Ethan. Something your father never told you." Ethan's chest tightened. But before she could continue, the nurse entered. Visiting hours were over. Margaret smiled weakly. "Come back tomorrow, Ethan. I'll tell you everything then." He nodded, heart pounding, mind on fire. That night, sleep refused to come. Ethan replayed her words again and again. "Something your father never told you." The next morning he returned, but the bed was empty, sheets folded, flowers gone. Margaret Shaw had vanished, and in her place, on the bedside table, lay a small envelope. On it, in trembling cursive letters, was written, "For Ethan Langford, from your father." Ethan's breath caught. He tore it open with shaking hands. Inside, a single sheet of yellowed paper and a photograph his father, young, smiling, standing beside a woman who looked just like Margaret. And in his father's handwriting, only one line. "Forgive me, son, she was your mother." Ethan's heart stopped. The hospital room seemed to tilt. His father's shadow had finally broken, and what lay beneath was a truth that shattered everything he thought he knew. The envelope trembled in Ethan's hand as the rain outside the hospital window began again, tapping like restless fingers against the glass. He read the words over and over until they blurred. "Forgive me, son, she was your mother." No sentence had ever felt heavier. He sank into the chair, the photograph slipping to the floor. For the first time in his life, the man he'd built his identity around his late father felt like a stranger. Ethan had inherited his empire, his habits, even his voice. But what had he really inherited, if the truth had been hidden behind a lie? He drove for hours that day, aimlessly, through streets slick with memory. Margaret Shaw. The woman his father loved, the woman he hit by accident, his mother. The word still felt foreign in his mouth. He returned to the hospital the next morning, desperate for answers, but no one had seen her. The nurse shrugged. Her discharge papers were gone. "She left before sunrise," the nurse said softly. "Said she had somewhere important to go." Ethan's heart clenched. Somewhere important. He thought of the old photo, of the park bench behind his father and Margaret, the fountain in the background. He recognized it, Langford Gardens, the private estate where his father used to walk every Sunday morning. That was where he went, and he found her. Margaret sat on the same bench, wearing the same faded coat, her face lifted to the gray sky. She didn't look surprised to see him. "I knew you'd find me," she said gently. Ethan stood there, rain dripping from his coat. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I wanted to," she whispered. "But Richard, he thought silence would protect you. He wanted you to grow up untouched by his mistakes." Ethan's eyes glistened. "But it wasn't a mistake. You weren't." Her smile was faint, proud, almost wistful. "I was a chapter he hid out of love, but I never stopped watching you. I saw your first interview on TV. You even tilt your head like he did when you think." He sat beside her, emotion tightening his chest. "You should have told me." Margaret looked at him, really looked as though memorizing every line of her son's face. "If I'd told you, you might have hated him. And no mother wants to be the reason her child loses faith in love." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. Rain fell softly between them, washing away years of silence. Finally, he reached for her hand, frail, warm, trembling. "You don't have to hide anymore." A tear slipped down her cheek, mingling with the rain. "I never wanted to, Ethan. I just wanted to see you one last time." He shook his head. "No, not one last time. Come home with me." And for the first time in his adult life, Ethan Langford, the billionaire, who had everything but love, brought someone home not out of guilt, but out of family. As they walked toward the waiting car, Margaret smiled through tears. "You even hold the umbrella like your father." Ethan looked at her and smiled faintly. "Then maybe I got the best of him after all." The rain fell softer then, like forgiveness from the sky.